Hello, everybody. Welcome to the May edition of Insights, hosted by OneVision. I am your host, Jason Griffing, Director of Product at OneVision Resources, and I am joined today by Patrick McCarthy, the Executive Director at ASEON. Patrick is fresh off of the Perspicacious Phoenix meeting in Arizona, in case you're wondering. Perspicacious is having a keen mental perception, discernment, or understanding. I had to search that. So thought I'd share that little tidbit with everyone else. In his work as an executive director, Patrick has a front row seat to working with, hundreds of integrators, and he is here to share his perspectives on the importance of building and embracing community in order to build healthier businesses and, quite frankly, healthier, better lives. So I know as a former integrator that the business is uniquely demanding, and as an industry, we do unfortunately have a unique ability to produce a high level of burnt out and stressed out operators. And so Patrick is a firm believer that community and connection are one of the most effective antidotes to that outcome. And we're here to unpack the reasons why and what we can do about it on this episode. So Patrick, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm noticing two things. One, I think I'm wearing that shirt that it's in that picture, which is from one of our conferences. But two, you're the only person that nailed perspicacious on the first try. And that was probably the easiest. We like to do alliterations and,
Yes, I
just
love the
have some fun with
alliterations.
it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I won't. Yeah, I won't lie that I had to search that up. I wasn't sure. And incidentally, I almost wore the shirt that I'm wearing in that headshot today, but it was just a little too hot here in Denver today.
Yeah, it's a
So,
nice shirt.
so anyways, all right. Well, we're going to jump in again. A high level agenda. Some of the big points that we're going to cover. Why integrators often feel isolated, even when surrounded by peers. What the best operators do differently when it comes to growth and decision making. How sales, process, and recurring revenue all actually connect, and what community and shared insight, how those are becoming really a big competitive advantage to those that really lean in and embrace them. So, Patrick, I was thinking about a good place to start this conversation, and I think this idea of kind of the dream versus the reality. You and I have talked about how a lot of integrators and operators in the channel get into the business out of a love for technology, building solutions, working with customers, and what they end up experiencing on a day-to-day basis can be, something quite different, right? So I'd love for you to share your perspectives that you've seen on that. How does this sort of play out, and what gets lost in that process?
Yeah, so I think this is a great question, but it's kind of interesting because I feel like I might weave into the psyche of some people that are listening because they're gonna go, that makes sense. I hear that, but that was sort of a common thread within my last keynote in Phoenix was you woke up one day, the integrator who was the best salesman who thought, they could sell their way out of any problem. They were the best technician, they loved programming, and then they woke up one day and they were a businessman, right? They were all of a sudden responsible because they hired one person and then two person and then five and then now they're a $6 million business with 20 people and payrolls that don't pause and QuickBooks that need to be reconciled, and they didn't know they signed up for all of that. So I called it the trophy and the grind, right? We get into this industry because we love to create custom solutions, things that are one of a kind, and you get so many stories of people with their favorite clients who literally say, "It's a blank canvas, right? Do what you do best. Tell me where to go." And they do all this work and they're thinking about how cool this is going to be. They hop in their car, they're driving back, they get a phone call because another client's Apple TV is frozen, right? And they're like, my God, like, how is this the same day that I just had where I am the artist with the paintbrush and I'm also, the technician troubleshooting, turn it on and turn it off again. So I think that's the dream and the reality of this entire industry, especially in a project-based business where you kind of become the heartbeat. Sometimes you need to step out of the way and let other people run the business and not think that you can do all of it at the same time. I think that's where they get lost in
Yeah,
the dream.
yeah. Yeah, I'm a former integrator, as I mentioned before, and I know I lived that reality. The nature of this business is you're often in a small business, maybe 5, 10, 15 people. Obviously, some of them get bigger, but a lot of the companies in our industry are pretty small. And so by definition, you're wearing a lot of hats, and then the hats that you're wearing as a leader or a business owner are often evolving as the needs of the business change, right? So maybe your sales and marketing hat, and then you finally get to a point where you can justify bringing on some help in sales and marketing, but then the constraint just moves somewhere else, and now you got to go put on your service manager hat or your project manager hat, and that can lead to, a lot of burnout. I think I'd love to hear your perspectives on how the integrators, like again, you interface with a lot of integrators. So the best ones out there that you see kind of navigating these challenges of the evolving business needs and not spreading themselves too thin, like how are they thinking about this challenge maybe differently than others?
Yeah, so I hate to use the word best, but I can tell you what a successful integrator looks like, because what I consider the benchmark of a success is the ability just to join an association and show up to it and know that their business is not on fire, right? If you're the best salesperson and you leave for 3 days, what happens to your sales if no one else is doing it? You need to recognize your seat on the bus and you need to build people around that. So I think the most successful ones are the ones that can step out of their business. Um, I talk to a lot of integrators, not only in the group, but outside the group, and they say, well, isn't my time better spent talking to a builder or working with an architect or doing something else? And then I will point to our conference where I can bring 150 companies together and say, I know 150 at minimum people who know how to step away from a business, who know how to leave for sometimes up to a week at a time, because everything they have put together, the business can continue to run. They know where they're supposed to sit on the bus. They know what happens when they leave, and there's operations and process around that. And that's the boring stuff. And I'm going to keep going back to, like, that's the grind of these businesses, is that there has to be systems in place that you don't just become a project-based business. And if the heartbeat leaves, then there's no progress forward. So I think
Yeah.
that's what people achieve, is they're able to step out of the business, and they do that through these different mechanics and different
Yeah.
levers.
Yeah, and I know you guys at ASEON, you're a buying group and you provide many different benefits to your dealers. I've been to several of your events and I've heard you guys, beating the drum on the importance of attending these events and obviously not just signing up for ASEON so that you can get the buying group discounts, but actually leaning in and really looking at it as a community and the value of, what you can learn by attending these events and connecting with people. Talk a little bit about maybe some of the challenges that you've seen and the way that you guys have overcome those challenges in terms of drawing people into these events, because I'm sure that from your perspective, you're a firm believer in they're going to get so much value out of being here, but sometimes there's this activation energy hurdle that people have to get over to push things aside and make room for a few days to step out of the business. So what are some of the things that you guys have seen success with in terms of motivating people to prioritize attending these events and prioritizing community?
Yeah, and it's a great question. It's kind of something that we have planted our flag on, is that we can be a community that helps each other. So my answer, typically beyond just I know a bunch of people that show up to our conferences, is that there are ideas that you can pick up every day when you come to a conference like this that will change fundamentally how you think about your business. This is so much different than one of our dealers says the elixir to all problems is just more sales. I get that. Pile on the sales and you'll have no more issues.
It's a fair
Um,
point. Yeah.
yeah, it's a great point. And you can get out of a lot of tight situations if you just sell, if you oversell yourself, but then, there's over everything's to that, right? There's burnout and tension and everything like that. So what we did for this conference and what we've kind of planted our flag around is this idea of community. And I stood on stage. Actually, I'm going to back up. When I was thinking about what I wanted to say on stage, I started throwing these ideas together, and perspicacious really jumped out at me as the idea that you should be able to see what's going on around you and know how to navigate it, or at least have a sense of it. And then I got this email from another dealer who said, it can be very isolating at times, right? You're even in a room full of your peers, because as owners, you're carrying this unique kind of pressure. And I want to provoke a space where there's more freedom for owners so they can work to live, not live to work. I think I put that on the stage like 5 times, right? Work to live, not live to work. That is super vulnerable. And I thought that was really cool that that wasn't like a confession. That was someone saying, hey, there are spaces that we can generate together that work towards this idea of, like, how do we work to live, not live to work? So the conference and kind of how we're carrying ourselves forward is a lot of like the knowledge in the room is the curriculum. And if I can stand on stage and say it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to look around the room and say, that I think that person's got all the answers and I don't know how they got there because I'm feeling my way around in the dark. And then you put them in a room together where someone at the front is a dealer and someone in the audience is a dealer, and those are 90% of your sessions, right? Is vulnerability from somebody who says, this is how I do it, and now you guys can poke holes in it, and somebody who sits in the audience and raises their hand and say, here's my issue, how do you guys see it? I think that's a departure from always bringing in thought leaders from different industries who you get two responses from that. One, the person in the room goes, this person has no idea what we do in our industry, which is fair. We're a small industry, and they take a hard right mentally and they're on their phone for the next hour. Um, or two, they come out of that session going, that was like, close enough, but I didn't get to ask my questions, or, I don't think that the knowledge I'm taking home from that conversation because I had to teach them about my industry is going to move me forward. So
Right.
put people that are already getting in the front of the room, and now you have a organization that teaches each other and is vulnerable and can have a positive flywheel instead of a negative flywheel.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I'm gonna launch a poll here really quickly. So if you're live attending with us today, I'd love if you could take just a second to respond to this question. So it's what's your current relationship with professional communities? So peer groups, buying groups, industry events, etc. Would love to get a pulse from folks in the room about how involved you are in community. Are you making it a priority? Is it always taking a back seat, etc.? And while we wait for those responses to come in, Patrick, you mentioned this idea of vulnerability a few times. That resonates with me. So I'm a member of like a local men's group as an example. So not a professional group, but more of like a personal, dads kind of getting together, right, and sharing things. And then I've experienced this professionally as well, where it feels like there's this dynamic where we're all like fixated on our own challenges because every day that's what we're living and that's what we're faced with, but we kind of assume maybe that others are. We go to these events and then there's this tendency that we all have to kind of put our best foot forward and share what's going well and share our successes. And I think that's that isolation factor that you're talking about, where there's this sort of asymmetry or almost like a mirage that happens where you can easily be fooled into thinking that you're the only one experiencing these challenges. So zoom into that concept of vulnerability for me and talk about your perspectives on the importance of being willing to open up and share those challenges that you're going through in the business. Because in my experience, as soon as you do that, you give everyone else permission to do the same. And all of a sudden the floodgates open and you realize, oh, I'm not alone. Like everybody is struggling with some version of this.
Yeah, I think you kind of set up the answer perfectly in saying that you're part of a local group that has nothing to do with business, but it is of your interest, right? And I think you go into that thinking, I think people need to change why they're being vulnerable and for what, right? When I think people say, I'm being vulnerable about my business, they take it as a reflection of them. But when they say, I'm being vulnerable about my understanding of being a father, or I'm being vulnerable about my um, understanding of our community. I show up to local community groups just because I want to talk to people about that. Or pickleball, right? Like name anything. And you don't have that same wall up. Why? Why is that? You want to learn, you want to meet other people who have good ideas, and you want to take their ideas, mix it with yours, and make it your own thing. But as soon as we start talking about our business, we clam up. And it maybe is partly because it's a small industry. You might be fighting for the same dollars, whether that's client or trade associate partners, your builders and architects. There's a number of different reasons, but the real gold in the hills only comes if you bring your shovel of vulnerability and you can show up and say, here are the issues I'm running into. 90% of the time, someone has already figured it out or they're on the same journey. And to go back to my keynote, why we called it the Phoenix, which I kind of weaved in here, was the Phoenix is the only creature that needs a community to witness it, right? You need to know what it was before, you need to know what it was during the fire, and you can see what it was after that. And in our business, we have different levels of Phoenix. You're either about to go into a fire, rebirth, and become something new, or you already have, or you're in the middle of it. So I think going in with that mentality of things that I'm doing are at different stages, and for me and for the person across the table from me, really helps you have that rebirth or have that fire that burns everything down and builds it back up. Because we've all thought that one day, like, wouldn't it be so nice to just light this whole thing on fire and start from scratch and just see where it lands? And um, sometimes it can be that extreme and it works, and sometimes you just need the right sentence to enter your head from somebody who's sitting across the table from you and already figured it
Yeah.
out. So I think
Yeah.
that's where we get that from.
Agreed. I'm going to end this poll here and we'll share the results very quickly. So it looks like about 75% of respondents are actively involved in getting real value from communities. So that's fantastic. And then we had about 13% involved, not sure it's doing much for me. And then 13% largely on my own right now. So again, it looks great. Like most people are leaning in. I know for me personally, I'm introverted. I tend to it does take like a little bit of a push for me sometimes to like prioritize community. But every time I go to one of these groups, whether it's a personal thing or a professional thing, I leave feeling motivated and recharged. Talk about your own personal experiences, like when you go to these events. What are some of the big things that you take
Hmm.
away, at a high level? Like the details are going to be different at every event, but like what motivates you put a lot of time and energy into building these events and being there yourself. What do you get out of it?
I mean, we solve all the world's problems, right? We come back and
That's
we have
great. See, and if
everything.
you don't go, that's what you're missing.
That's right. You're
Yeah.
missing all that. No, it's very energizing. It's really really cool to sit in a room. And I'm curious the 26% of people that are in something or don't want to be in something, if they're kind of feeling like um, they're not worthy of bringing their problems forward, or they are not connecting with the people around them. And I think all of that is okay. I think you can go into that. I think you can go into a conference or a CEDIA Expo or something and sit in a room and not, you don't actually have to talk. But I think you should go in with the mindset that you want to change something. Like your business isn't perfect, because if it was, you probably wouldn't be in a community. So go in there being honest with yourself, like reflect on what's happening. So I think what's really cool is that we all get to slow down, we all get to reflect on what we do, and we all get to become, and hold that level of vulnerability. So looking ahead and around the corner is something that I get asked a lot of, like, what do you see when you go to a conference, and what are the topics you want to dial in on? It's not typically anything brand new you've never heard about. Sometimes we get a new category like shading or lighting that starts popping up and becomes more popular. I think energy is going to be that next big plateau that we all want to clamor onto. I think it's a little bit of a different animal. I think people who say that we'll never get there didn't have the foresight to think about shading the same way and to have a separate shading company. I think energy and electricians are all going to become a natural evolution of what we do. Just like enterprise grade networking, cloud networking, who would have thought we'd be managing that to this degree? AI is a huge part of this. I think the same deal with being vulnerable and doing something with the community. You should absolutely pick any AI tool, and don't treat it as like a Google on steroids. Treat it as a project manager or a consultant or something like that. Don't maybe do everything it tells you, but treat it that way. Talk to it that
Hmm.
way. Plan with it. Archetype that way. And then I think service as a service, right? I think it's very curious that and maybe it makes sense, all the kind of thumbprints and fingerprints are there. The integrators that, the best integrator, and there's a really good businessman, the really good businessman, the one thing they're doing is tracking all their clients and tracking all their sales, and they know who these people are. If you're a service as a service and you're able to go back to your clients and you're able to upgrade or check in or show them your value, that is RMR that you can continue to reap the benefits of. And that is how you can afford another truck, or you can afford another two-man team to continue on new businesses. So the energy you get from throwing those ideas out there, you get people vulnerable, you get them ready to talk, then you throw some new ideas out there, and it's just electric, it's electric.
Hmm.
And these ideas, they start popping and jumping around. Um, that is like where mentally the headspace that I think we come out of there and we come really energized and it's a lot of fun.
Definitely. Yeah, and there is something about, these in-person engagements too. We all went through COVID years ago, and that really shifted a lot of things onto Zoom, and to some extent that some of that stuck around. Obviously, in-person events have largely gained their traction back, but I think for me at least, like the whole COVID experience and spending so much more time on Zoom and isolated from people, it almost like that muscle atrophied a little bit, and I felt like I had to sort of gear back up and get back into the in-person thing. But there's just fundamentally something different about being able to connect with people. I joke in 3 dimensions. I can actually see how
Yeah.
tall you are and things like that. Like, but just the energy, like being in the same room with people, I find that it's just fundamentally different than anything we can try to replicate on Zoom. I'm curious if you share that
Well,
perspective.
I do share in the sometimes people are way taller than I thought.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, you do have
Yeah, you
really
build these
long legs.
images of people for some
I had
reason that, yeah.
yeah, I had no idea. Um, I definitely, it's definitely more important to make friends and be a part of this community. We have done a lot of community work as well. I've shared with you some of I don't know if you wanted to start jumping into that, but there's like a really cool aspect of what we do around charity that has really
Yeah,
driven the
let's
community.
let's go there. I'd love for you to share that story. So this was at your recent event. Feel
Yeah.
free to dive into that.
Yeah, and I wanted to preempt it because it's just so exciting and it's something that we've become really passionate about, not only as the ASEON team, but as the entire ASEON Association. Um, ASEON Unlimited was purchased by Nationwide Marketing Group a couple of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And the one thing they said, we're going to leave you alone, continue what you're doing. You guys are doing great. But the one thing you have to do is charity or community, building the charity work and leave spaces better than you found them is what they do, and they do a lot for children's hospitals and brain cancers, and they do meals. They pack meals every time they get together. They bring 3,000 retailers together across the country, and they pack food that can only be measured in tons, which is really cool. So started scratching our heads and thinking, how can we do this? We have an airtight schedule as it is of everything we want them to learn. Um, and we started talking about it internally. And then we happened to have some misfortune where one of our dealers passed away in a plane accident. And we thought this is kind of the perfect moment for us to embrace something really tough that has affected one of our businesses, bring it forward, be vulnerable, and walk towards something really tough instead of, shying away or pretending it isn't real. And it just clicked immediately that this is a community that cares about the people next to them. I'm going to do my best without getting too choked up. So we
Mm,
we continued this and we kind of kept going with it. We did a fundraiser for someone who lost their wife to colorectal cancer. When the wildfires hit, LA Children's Choir, we raised money for them so that those kids could get back to what they were doing and have uninterrupted paths into their future as musicians in Los Angeles. Then went to Chicago and had one for a member who lost his daughter to domestic violence. And we packed teddy bears and we wrote nice notes. And the idea was that your teddy bear was a person, so write a story about it. So we packed it all together and we donated it to a woman's shelter. So women and children who are trying to escape domestic violence have a home and they have comfort there when they show up. They have teddy bears and they have stories and something to put a smile on when it's really in their darkest spot. Um, so we're open the doors to this whole kind of idea of charity. And then in Phoenix, we were working with Mike Cleary at Sonance, and he had lost his youngest son. He had 3 boys. He lost his youngest son to leukemia. At the same time, his college friend Jen Wheeler, uh, they were growing up together. They had the same amount of kids. Jack was with Mike, and Bryn was with Jen, and the two of them were, the inseparable 2 kids that would run off, and they came back smiling, like, "Why are you guys smiling?" They had their first kiss together when they went camping. Just being little kids. And they told their story about that. And Bryn actually ended up passing away from cancer as well. So we went on stage and we bought a whole bunch of uh, basketball. The Golden State Warriors had everybody in Golden State Warriors gear because that was Jack's favorite team. And we held an auction, and the auction was like we had a Barbie dream house, and you were auctioning it, but it was like the dream house and the money were also going towards the Children's Hospital Orange County because they were going to build a new hospital room for children. So the idea was, again, we could put toys in this thing. Everything we had that was being auctioned was going straight to the room. People were building wellness kits. So like when the parents were there for far too long, they could shave or shower, or they had socks and stuff like that in there. In 45 minutes, the group raised $150,000.
It's incredible.
Um, and it was super cool. It was just all this stuff about education and building businesses and being friends with people is cool. This is greatness. This is how you come together as a community and be vulnerable and stand by someone and say, we're here for you. And this is more than just a buying group or, a bunch of friends you get together. So that's like the coolest thing we do at ASEON,
Yeah.
100% is this charity portion.
That's so powerful. Just hearing you tell that story. I did drop a link into the chat for those if you're interested, to the Bryn Wheeler Foundation. This was the most recent one. I've mentioned before, I've been to a couple of your events, and I always find the charity portion of it really motivating. It's a very strong connecting force, I feel like, in the room. And the other thing I feel like it really does is it puts everything else into stark perspective. Right. So you
Right.
spend a lot of time, like, you're thinking about all these business challenges, and maybe your phone is ringing with issues in the business while you're there, and you're maybe stressed out and about travel and stuff, and then something like this comes up, and again, it just kind of like puts everything else into perspective, right?
So true. And the other cool part is that um, people are affected by this all across different levels of it, and they get to come forward and say, I'm in a room full of people who've also been affected by this, and now I can do that. And then the other side of it is they share their story of their community givebacks. Michael Johnson at Mosaic in Alabama, he does blues, booze, and brews or something like so. Around October, he has a big open house, and they barbecue, and they bring out some beer, and they bring the dogs, and they have a good time inside the community, and all the money goes towards a local charity. And he raises a couple $1,000s, and that's a win. Even a couple $1,000s is more than they had before. So it doesn't need to be $150,000 every time you get together. A couple $1,000s can help your local charity. So I think that's in an industry full of very passionate people and very, artistically passionate. Like I think this all goes hand in hand, and I encourage you all to think about how you can give back to a part of your community. I think you'll be really grateful and surprised about what it unlocks, not only inside of yourself and as you grow as a character, but I think it'll unlock a lot for how you treat your business and how you look at the world and how you connect with the people around you. I think it's just
Yeah.
a cool
Yeah.
thing to do.
Yeah, it can be a great way to, if you're looking to just build your network and build a sense of community and connection, getting involved in any of these sort of volunteer efforts to lift up your community. And there are always, hundreds of ways you can do this just within your local geography. So I think it's great that you do that. And, speaking of that, it's always hard to sort of segue back to business stuff after something that impactful. But
Yeah.
like, you know, there's a good segue here to, like, if you're, for somebody listening to this who is maybe not involved in community as much as they would like to be, maybe they're part of ASEON, maybe they're not. What would you recommend? Like, what are some good first steps for somebody who's looking to build a stronger sense of connection and community?
I think there's a couple of ways, and I'm going to be in the mindset of likely this is people who are running a multi-stage business, and I think, or like with people in it, I think you should talk to them and introduce this idea and allow them to come forward and say, this is something that is close to me, or I'm struggling. Like if you're really struggling and you don't know and you just want to be helpful, look at the people around you. Look at your first degree of your community. Those are the people you work with. Ask them what's going on in their lives. if you feel very passionate about animals, go talk to the local shelters. I mean, it's kind of what's affected you, right? I think is a great way to be introspective about that. And if you can't find anything right away, talk to your local community or talk to the people around you, talk to your neighbors. Um, I think that's kind of the easiest way. And I think don't be afraid to feel like $200 isn't enough. Like you just got to do it. You just have to do anything. You have to get started. You have to start somewhere. Um, and they are always so grateful. Always, 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 always. If you give time, or your dedication, your authentic self to something like this, that's how you can get started and be successful with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to shift gears here as we kind of come down the home stretch and get maybe a little bit more tactical. You have, like we've talked about, a unique perspective in terms of your interfacing with hundreds of integrators, across the country on a regular basis. You alluded to some of this stuff at a high level before, but I'd love to go a little bit deeper on based on your experiences at these events and interfacing with integrators otherwise, like what are some of the big themes and topics, like industry specific stuff, that you would encourage integrators who are listening to this to be focused on, whether it's around sales, operations, product lineups and expansion? What are the things that come to mind to you as kind of the most essential areas for an integrator to be focused on right now?
Um, it's a great question because it's kind of you got to look back at yourself and say what's the most friction in my business. And I think there's two things that I want to touch on, which is I've done a little bit of that, like you said, but the one is that if you're a project-based business and you're looking down the home stretch of what you want to do, whether that's sell or give it to somebody else or um, retire with it, you have to understand that if you're the person driving everything forward and you leave, there's nothing left to sell. So I think you have to understand your goals. And if your short-term or long-term goals are just make more money, that's great. You can add a lot of sales and just pile it on and keep going forward. If your long-term vision is I'm going to build this thing up so one day I can step out of it, you should understand that you need a succession plan that is more than just I'm going to hand over the keys, because if you're the main sales and tech and programmer, you're not going to get as much money for that business as you think you will. So I think there's part of your business of just understanding what are your long-term goals. I think every integrator should have goals for how you interact with the world, a, a, a mission statement. And I think you should have a goal of who you want to be 10 years down the road. And it sounds so silly, but it can be really powerful to just write those two sentences down. It's just two sentences. Um, to go a little bit more current and maybe macro, it's tough out there. It is a very tough economy. There is a multitude of issues going on inside and outside of this country that make it very difficult to continue at the same pace you were maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And that's all sort of coming to a head right now, both for dealers and vendors. I mean, I have vendors telling me they can't build the products they want because by the time they source the materials, they can't sell it at a price you could sell it at. So there's a pause on that. So understanding that you're in tough times, maybe the toughest you've seen in a while, um, going back and kind of getting everything in order starts with really good operations. It starts with a great partner like OneVision who can open the door for service. I'm sure you go through a lot of the same conversations with people about service as a service and how you're able to go back to your clients and the importance of that. Um, I think there's a number of different things. I think, but it all starts with your goals. Like, what do you want to do with this business? If you're a two-man operation or a one-person operation and you just want to do this so that you can cruise into retirement, great. If you're a 15-person, 30-person operation, what are you gearing up for? What does the next step look like? Have you positioned yourself in a way that you can step away from the business and go somewhere for a week to become a smarter person and everything continues forward? I think those are kind of the moments that you need to look back at and recognize like you need the tools to handle that. It doesn't come overnight and it's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. I think, company profitability and enterprise value sometimes go hand in hand, but they're
Yeah.
not the same thing. And, sometimes you may have to sacrifice short-term profitability in order to invest in, say, additional people. to build enterprise value so that the whole business isn't basically you. And if you
Hmm.
step away, all the value goes with you. So I think, interestingly, like attending these events and stepping away from the business for a few days and seeing what happens with the business when you're not there is almost a good litmus test, right? For like,
Absolutely.
where am I at, on this journey?
Yeah. We talk about, we're at a conference, we talk about that. We talk about, man, I'm so scared. I'm answering emails all day and then you're not learning. You're just working harder. You're just in a different place working harder. It's
Yeah.
it's truly unplug and take in all around you. And we treat our vendors like members too, and we put you at the same roundtables. And when we do advice sessions on all this stuff, we have vendors who are telling like, this is what I see about my business. And some of our vendors are also owner operators, right? So they have the exact same problems and they want to fix all their problems with more sales and they don't understand where it's coming from. So there's all this great feedback that's not even just dealer to dealer, but it's the other side. And you can understand how a vendor works and how their operations are holding up. I think all that stuff is very insightful. Um, that's how you get a lot of access to people, not only in a pinch, but also for their knowledge. I mean, these people are talking to huge networks and huge swarms of people. It's really cool to be a part of anything that gets you more access to more people.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Every person that you meet and every connection that you make at one of these events also gets you kind of interconnected with their whole network, and it has this really, compounding effect. So I think your point also about it's a dicey looking kind of macro environment out there. There's a lot of geopolitical uncertainty with a number of things going on, and so I think that does really bring us full circle to now is the as good a time as any to lean in, get involved in community, make sure you're leveraging and embracing those relationships that you have with your peers and business groups out there to help you navigate this this difficult time. So Patrick, this has been a really it's been a fun conversation. I think you've shared some really valuable insights here with folks that are looking to build better businesses, get work-life balance back, and really get themselves on a better path. So for anybody who is listening to this who may want to connect with you, learn more about what you're up to, maybe learn more about the ASEON group, what would be the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, ASEONunlimited.com is our website. That's really easy. But the best thing that you can do is ask somebody you know about ASEON. Ask your rep, ask your vendor, ask, your buddy in the market if they know anything about an association like ASEON. I'm a firm believer that everybody should be a part of something. So if you're not and you're sitting out there, um, you should be a part of something, whether it's ASEON, HTSA, ProSource, Oasis. Cedia, join your local group, join something, and figure out what your goals are and head towards that goal. And I'm telling you, it sounds ridiculous. Writing a goal down feels so foreign, but write that goal down and how do you get there? What are the steps? Joining an association is the best step I think you'll ever make for your business.
Excellent. All right. Well, Patrick, I think that's a great place to close things out. So thank you again for taking some time to join us and sharing your ideas here. And we really appreciate it. For everybody who joined us live, thank you as well for taking some time out of your day. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you on the next one. So thanks again, Patrick, and take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.